The smell of expensive lavender hit me the moment I walked in. My mother was on her knees meticulously pinning a silk hem on my sister's $45,000 wedding dress. When I asked about the bank account, the one holding the $190,000 I had saved for my daughter's college tuition, she didn't even look up. She just smiled around the silver pins in her mouth and said, "Thanks for funding the wedding, Amelia. It's a family investment." She thought she had won. She saw a tired single mom in a thrift store cardigan. She didn't realize she was talking to a forensic accountant who hunts hidden assets for a living. I didn't scream. I didn't throw a fit. I simply walked out with the invitation in my hand because I knew something she didn't. This wasn't going to be a marriage. It was going to be a federal case. If you think you know where this goes, you don't. The only sound in the office at 2:14 a.m. was the hum of the HVAC system and the rhythmic clicking of my keyboard. They call me a hidden titan. At the firm, a ghost who hunts down millions in hidden assets for corporate clients, yet here I was wearing a thrift store cardigan and drinking cold gas station coffee. It's a strange irony. I spend my nights unraveling complex tax evasion schemes for billionaires, but I live like I'm one paycheck away from the street. Because I am. Or rather, I was. Every cent I didn't spend on rent or instant noodles went into one specific place. Account 8802. My daughter Lily's Freedom Fund. You'd think a forensic accountant would check her own balance every day, right? But I didn't. That account was a vault. It was sacred. I treated it like it didn't exist, so I wouldn't be tempted to touch it when the radiator broke or when Lily needed braces. I just worked harder. I took the extra cases, I ate the cheap food, but then my phone buzzed against the laminate desk. It wasn't a text. It wasn't a low balance alert. The screen lit up with a red notification from the bank's security app, alert request for account closure initiated. The air in the room didn't change, but suddenly, I couldn't feel my fingers. Account closure. That account had been dormant for withdrawals for 18 years. Only deposits, strictly deposits. A normal person would panic. A normal person would call the 1-800 number and scream at a robot. But I don't panic. I investigate. That's what I do. I didn't open the consumer app on my phone. Instead, I tabbed over on my work terminal and logged into the bank's back-end portal. I still had the admin credentials from when I audited their security protocols 3 years ago. The screen refreshed. The green numbers turned to black text. Balance $0. I stared at the cursor blinking on the screen. It wasn't just empty. It was gutted. But in my line of work, numbers don't just vanish. They leave footprints. I didn't cry. I didn't throw the coffee mug against the wall. I clicked Export Transaction History. The file downloaded in 2 seconds. I opened the CSV file, and there it was, the autopsy of my life's work. The withdrawal hadn't happened online. It was done in person. Yesterday afternoon, 3:45 p.m. I highlighted the row. The final balance before the transfer wasn't a round number. It was exactly 109,420.50 cents. That 50 cents. That was from last Tuesday. Lily had set up a lemonade stand on the sidewalk, sold 2 cups to the mailman, and proudly handed me 2 quarters. "For college, Mom," she'd said. I had deposited those 2 quarters the next morning. Now they were gone. I scrolled to the right. Column F, authorizing agent. Column G, signature image. I knew the handwriting before I even zoomed in. It was a loops and flourishes script, elegant and sharp like a knife wrapped in silk. Beatrice Vance, my mother. The woman who hadn't called me on my birthday in 5 years. The woman who told me I was disgracing the family when I got pregnant with Lily. I sat back in my cheap ergonomic chair, the cold light of the monitor stinging my eyes. The transaction log showed the authorization code, joint tenancy, with right of survivorship. I closed my eyes and the memory hit me like a physical blow. I was 19. I was stupid. She had taken me to the bank smiling that rare, predatory smile. "You don't know how to handle money, Amelia," Let me stay on the account, just for emergencies, to protect you from boys who might use you. God, the irony was so thick I could taste it. I spend my life protecting clients from scammers, from thieves, from wolves in expensive suits. But I had left the front door open for the wolf who raised me. She didn't just take my money. She took Lily's 50 cents. She took 18 years of canceled vacations, worn-out shoes, and overtime shifts. I looked at the IP address of the pre-authorization login. It traced back to a residential address in the wealthy district. Her house. Most daughters would call their mom crying, asking why. They would beg. They would ask for it back. I looked at the timestamp again. She had walked into a branch, smiled at a teller, signed her name, and burned my daughter's future to the ground, probably before going to afternoon tea. She thought this was over. She thought I was still that scared 19-year-old girl she could bully into submission. I reached for my phone, but I didn't dial her number. I opened a new folder on my desktop and named it Case BV 8802. She wanted a family investment. She was about to get a forensic audit. I took a sip of the cold coffee. It tasted like ash, but it woke me up. I wasn't going to sleep tonight. Beatrice Vance had stolen $109,420.50, but she had made a fatal error. She forgot that her daughter hunts thieves for a living, and I was just getting started. The scent of expensive lavender hit me the moment I pushed open the heavy oak door of my mother's house. It was a smell I used to associate with safety, but now it just smelled like a cover-up, a thick floral mask sprayed over something rotting. I hadn't slept. I hadn't changed out of my work clothes. I still had the transaction log folded in my pocket, burning against my leg like a radioactive isotope. I walked into the living room, and the scene before me was so perfect it made my stomach turn. Beatrice was there on her knees, her mouth full of silver pins. Standing on a velvet pedestal was my sister Tiffany. She was draped in layers of white silk that probably cost more than my car, staring at herself in a gilded mirror with a look of pure adoration. They didn't hear me come in. Or maybe they did, and I just didn't matter enough to acknowledge. I stood there for a moment, watching the woman who had emptied my bank account meticulously adjust a hemline. It was a masterclass in cognitive dissonance. How could hands that gentle be the same ones that strangled my daughter's future? I cleared my throat, a sharp, ugly sound in that pristine room. "Where is it?" I asked. My voice wasn't loud. It was the flat, dead tone I use when I find a hidden offshore account during an audit. Beatrice didn't jump. She didn't even look up. She just pulled a pin from her lips and stabbed it into the fabric near Tiffany's waist. "You're blocking the light, Amelia," she said, her voice smooth. "Move to the left." I didn't move. "The $199,000, Mother. The money for Lily. Why is the account empty?" Tiffany giggled, a hollow sound. "Oh, is she talking about the budget, Mom? I told you she'd be weird about it." Beatrice finally stood up. She wiped her hands on her apron and looked at me. There was no guilt in her eyes. There was no shame. Instead, she offered me a bright, terrifying smile, the kind a shark gives before it drags you under. "Oh, that," she said, waving her hand, as if dismissing a petty grievance. "I meant to call you, but the florist has been a nightmare. They tried to substitute peonies for roses. Can you imagine?" She walked over to a side table, poured herself a glass of cucumber water, and turned back to me. Then she delivered the line that killed the last shred of hope I had for this family. "Thanks for funding your sister's wedding, Amelia. It's a family investment." The air left my lungs. I blinked, trying to process the twisted logic. "Investment," I choked out. "You stole from your granddaughter. That was for college. That was 18 years of my life." Beatrice sighed, the long, suffering sigh of a parent dealing with a slow child. She walked over and patted my cheek. Her hand was cold. "Don't be dramatic, darling. You're smart. You're a hustler. You can make that money back in a few years. You always figure it out." She gestured to Tiffany, who was now twirling, admiring the way the silk caught the light. "Tiffany isn't like you. She needs this." She's marrying into the grandnephew of a senator. Do you understand what that means for us? For the family brand? She spoke about us like we were a corporation. I was the R&D department, the one who worked in the dark to keep the lights on. Tiffany was the marketing department, the shiny billboard. Beatrice continued, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. I simply reallocated resources to where they would generate the highest return. This wedding puts us on the map. It secures Tiffany's future. And when she's settled, she'll help us. It's for everyone's good. The narcissism was breathtaking. She didn't see herself as a thief. She saw herself as a portfolio manager, and I was just an asset she had liquidated without permission. I want it back, I said, though I knew it was useless. The money was already cut into flowers, silk, and deposits. Beatrice laughed softly. It's gone, sweetie, spent, and honestly, you should be thanking me. I'm giving you a chance to be part of something important. She reached into a drawer near the entryway table. Speaking of which, since you're here, she pulled out a heavy cream-colored envelope with gold embossing. I had to fight Jason's mother to get you a spot. They wanted a strict head count. She thrust the envelope at my chest. I took it automatically. My fingers brushed the textured paper. It was heavy, expensive, probably $5 just for the cardstock. I flipped it over. There, in Beatrice's distinct, sharp handwriting, was a note at the bottom. Guest list B, ceremony only, no reception dinner. I stared at the words, guest list B. I had paid for the venue, I had paid for the dress, I had paid for the food, and I wasn't even allowed to eat it. It's a small venue, Beatrice said, turning her back to me to adjust Tiffany's train again. And plates are $300 a head. Since you're technically the one paying, I figured you'd appreciate me saving you the cost. You can come to the church, wave at your sister, and then go home to whatever it is you do. I stood there for a long time. The smell of lavender was suffocating now. A normal person would have screamed. A normal person would have torn the dress off the bride. But I felt a strange calm settle over me, a coldness that started in my chest and spread to my fingertips. This wasn't a family dispute anymore. This was a crime scene. And Beatrice had just handed me a piece of evidence. I didn't tear up the invite. I didn't throw it in her face. I slid it carefully into my bag, right next to the bank transaction log. She thought she had just dismissed a guest. She didn't realize she had just armed an enemy. You're right, Mother, I said, my voice steady. I should look at this as an investment. Beatrice didn't even turn around. Glad you finally see sense. Close the door on your way out. I walked out into the cool afternoon air, the invite heavy in my bag. She thought the investment was the wedding. She was wrong. The investment was the lawsuit I was about to build, and the return on investment was going to be her total destruction. I started the car, but as I pulled away, I saw a black Porsche pull into the driveway. Jason, the groom. He looked nervous. And for a split second, I wondered, did he know? Or was he just another asset in Beatrice's portfolio? I needed to find out. But first, I had to survive the heartbreak of what I had to do next. The smell of burnt bacon and stale coffee hung heavy in the rusty spoon. A diner 3 towns over from my mother's district. I chose it because Beatrice wouldn't be caught dead here, and apparently that was the only way my father felt safe seeing me. When the door chimed, I watched him walk in. Robert Vance, a man who used to carry me on his shoulders, now hunched over in a trench coat like he was smuggling contraband, not meeting his daughter. He slid into the booth opposite me, his eyes darting to the window, terrified that his wife might track him down. He looked older, smaller. The hidden titan in me didn't feel pity. It felt a cold, clinical assessment of a depreciating asset. Did you know? I asked. I didn't say hello. I didn't order coffee. He flinched. He picked up the plastic menu, his hands shaking so hard the laminated paper rattled. Amelia, honey, keep your voice down. He whispered it like a prayer. Your mother. She's been under so much pressure. The wedding, the senator's family. She didn't mean to hurt you. Did you know I repeated, spacing the words like bullet points on a subpoena. He dropped the menu. Tears welled up in his eyes, tracking through the wrinkles on his cheeks. "She told me last week," he choked out. "She said she was reallocating the funds. I told her it was wrong, Amy. I really did. I told her that was Lily's money." I leaned back, the vinyl seat squeaking against my jacket. He told her. He said words, but he didn't stop her. He didn't call me. He didn't change the password. He watched the robbery happen and then drove the getaway car because he was too afraid to take the keys. "So you let her," I said. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact. "I couldn't stop her," he sobbed quietly into a paper napkin. "You know how she is. She would have made my life hell." He was crying for himself, not for me. He was crying because he was caught in the middle, not because his granddaughter's future had been liquidated for centerpieces. Then he did something that made the bile rise in my throat. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a plain white envelope. It was wrinkled. He slid it across the sticky table, covering it with his hand like a drug deal. "I've been saving this," he whispered. "It's my poker money. I want you to have it. I'll give you some every month. We'll fix this, Amy. I promise." I stared at the envelope. I didn't need to open it to know what was inside, but I did anyway. $200. 4 $50 bills. My brain, trained to analyze financial disasters, immediately crunched the numbers. The theft was $199, $420.50. My father was offering an amortization schedule of $200 a month. I did the math in my head in less than a second. At this rate, it would take him exactly 997 months to pay me back. 83 years, I said aloud. He blinked, confused. "What?" "It will take you 83 years to pay back what your wife stole in 10 minutes, Dad. You'll be 145 years old when the debt is settled." The hope in his eyes died. The numbers stripped away his fantasy of being the hero. He wasn't the hero. He was the enabler. And suddenly I realized something terrifying. Beatrice was a shark she bit because it was her nature. But Robert, he was the water. He was the passive fluid medium that allowed the shark to swim, to hunt, to kill. Without his silence, she would be powerless, and that made him worse. The betrayal of the good parent cuts deeper than the cruelty of the bad one because you never see the knife coming. I slid the envelope back across the table. "Keep it," I said. "You're going to need it. Amelia, please." He reached for my hand, but I pulled away. "I'm your father." "No," I said, standing up. "You're a witness, and right now you're a hostile one." I felt something snap inside my chest. It was the last tether, the final emotional string connecting me to the identity of Amelia, the daughter. That person was gone. She was a liability. In her place, a different operating system booted up, cold, objective, ruthless. I was no longer a child seeking approval. I was a forensic auditor, and I was looking at a compromised entity. I walked out of the diner, leaving him crying into his coffee. I didn't look back. The bell on the door chimed again, a physical anchor signaling the end of my family life. I was alone now, completely and utterly alone. But solitude is good for an investigation. It removes the variables. I walked to my car, my mind already organizing the next steps. I had the theft? I had the whole Beatrice and her enabler. Now I needed to understand the why, not the excuse she gave, but the deep, rot-filled history that made her think she owned me. To do that, I had to revisit the past I had tried so hard to bury. I unlocked my phone and scrolled back to a date 10 years ago, the day the joint account lie began. The evidence wasn't just in the bank logs, it was in the memories I had suppressed. And it was time to dig them up. The silence in my car was louder than my father's sobbing had been. I sat in the diner parking lot, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white, staring at a crack in the windshield that I had been meaning to fix for 6 months. I never fixed it because that $100 went into account 8802. Everything went into 8802. People ask how a single mom saves nearly 200 grand on a salary that started at minimum wage. They think it's magic. It's not magic. It's blood. It's a decade of eating toast for dinner so your kid can have fresh fruit. It's wearing the same winter coat until the lining shreds because a new one costs exactly the price of a college textbook. I closed my eyes and the crack in the glass dissolved into a memory from 10 years ago. I was standing in Beatrice's foyer, the same one where Tiffany was now posing in her silk dress. But back then, I wasn't an investor. I was 22, terrifyingly pregnant, and holding a duffel bag that contained everything I owned. Beatrice didn't yell. Beatrice never yells. It's too plebeian. She just looked at my swollen stomach with the same expression she used for a dry cleaning error. "You've made your choice, Amelia," she said, adjusting a vase of lilies. "We don't support mistakes in this house. It's bad for the brand." She closed the door in my face. The lock clicked. That sound, that sharp metallic click, was the sound of my safety net vanishing. I drove an old Honda Civic to a basement apartment that smelled like mold and despair. That's where the money came from. It came from the nights when Lily was 3 years old, burning up with a 102-degree fever. I remember sitting on the floor beside her mattress, one hand holding a cool washcloth to her forehead, the other hand typing furiously on a laptop I'd borrowed from the library. I was freelancing doing tax returns for independent contractors. $5 here, $10 there. I remember one night specifically. Lily woke up crying, her little chest heaving with a cough that rattled my bones. I wanted to hold her. I wanted to sleep. But I had a deadline for a truck driver's audit that would pay me $50. $50. So I let her cry for 2 minutes while I finished the spreadsheet. I sold those 2 minutes of comfort. I sold my sleep. I sold my youth. I deposited that $50 the next morning, and I did it again and again for 10 years. So why did I put that blood money into a joint account? The memory shifted further back. I was 19. We were at the bank, the air conditioning blasting, freezing my bare arms. Beatrice was signing a document, her gold bracelets clinking against the mahogany desk. She slid the paper toward me. "Sign here, darling," she cooed. "It's a joint tenancy with right of survivorship." I hesitated. I wanted my own account. But then she dropped her voice, leaning in close, her perfume clouding my judgment. "Amelia, you know you're too trusting. You're naive. If you have this money alone, some boy is going to come along, tell you he loves you and drain you dry. I'm doing this to protect you. I'm the only one who will never steal from you." Gaslighting isn't a sudden event, it's a slow poison. She convinced me that the world was full of wolves and she was the shepherd. She convinced me that I was incompetent, that I needed her name on that paper to keep me safe. For 18 years, even after she kicked me out, I left that account open. It was a superstition. A tiny, pathetic part of me thought that if our names were still linked on paper, maybe, just maybe, she still loved me. I opened my eyes. The crack in the windshield was back. The rain had started to fall, drumming a frantic rhythm on the roof. The irony was so sharp it felt like it pierced a lung. She was right. She told me to beware of predators who would charm me and steal my future. She just forgot to mention that the predator was sitting across the desk wearing gold bracelets. She didn't protect me from the wolves. She was the wolf. She had groomed me to be the perfect victim, hardworking enough to fill the trough and insecure enough to leave the gate unlocked. I looked at the passenger seat. Empty. Just my laptop bag and the ghosts of the last decade. But as I turned the key in the ignition, the engine roared to life, and something inside me shifted. The sadness evaporated, leaving behind something cold and hard. A diamond forms under pressure. A weapon forms under heat. I wasn't the 19-year-old girl anymore. I wasn't the scared single mom typing for $50. I was a forensic auditor who had just discovered a massive internal fraud. I shifted the car into drive. I wasn't going to cry about the past. I was going to leverage it. I had the transaction logs, I had the motive. And now, thanks to my father's cowardice and my mother's arrogance, I knew exactly where the money went. I pulled out of the parking lot, the tires screeching slightly on the wet asphalt. I wasn't going back to my apartment to sleep. I was going home to build a war room. Beatrice Vance liked to play games with money. Fine. She was about to learn that while she was busy buying flowers, I had been learning how to hunt. The money was gone, transformed into silk and champagne. But money leaves a trail, and I was going to follow every single cent until it led me straight to her throat. The investigation phase was over. The hunt was beginning. The hum of the refrigerator was the only noise in my apartment. My dining table, usually covered in Lily's homework and coloring books, had been transformed. I pushed aside a half-eaten bowl of cereal and opened my laptop. This wasn't a kitchen anymore. It was a war room. People think money vanishes. They think that when a thief steals, the value just disappears into thin air. But I'm a forensic accountant. I know the physics of finance. Money is energy. It doesn't disappear. It just changes form. It turns into cars, into houses, into silk, into secrets. My mother had taken $199, $420.50. That energy had to go somewhere, and I was going to find exactly where it landed. I cracked my knuckles and logged into the bank's back-end system again. My eyes scanned the metadata of the withdrawal. Beatrice had been smart, but not smart enough. She hadn't taken a suitcase of cash that triggers federal reporting. Instead, she had requested a series of cashier's checks to be issued from the withdrawal amount. Because my name was still on the account history, I had the right to view the digital images of those cleared checks. I clicked the first file. Check number 101. Pay to the order of Vera Wang Bridal. Amount $45,000. Date. Same day as the withdrawal. I pulled up a second window on my screen, Instagram. I didn't need a warrant to search my sister's life. Tiffany broadcasted every breath she took. I scrolled to the date on the check. There it was, a carousel of photos. Tiffany was standing on a pedestal drinking champagne, wearing a dress that looked like a cloud of spun sugar. The caption read, "Mom made my dream come true. Vera Wang. Custom. Blessed." I felt a cold spike in my chest. That wasn't just a dress. That was my daughter's freshman and sophomore years of tuition draped over Tiffany's body. I took a screenshot. I saved it to the folder. Case BVV8802. Click, save, next. I opened the second check image. Check 1102. Pay to the order of the Plaza Hotel. Amount $80,000. Memo venue deposit. Non-refundable. $80,000. Just for the room. Just to rent the air they would breathe for 6 hours. I switched back to Instagram. I found the Save the Date post. It was a video of Tiffany and Jason dancing in the empty ballroom of the plaza, spinning around under chandeliers that cost more than my car. I looked at the date. It was posted 2 hours after the check cleared. Beatrice hadn't just stolen the money, she had gambled it immediately on a venue that wouldn't give a dime back. She had burned the bridge behind her so I couldn't cross it. Click, save. Next, check number 103. Pay to the order of Dr. Simon Orion, Beverly Hills. Amount, $20,000. Plastic surgery. I frowned. Tiffany was beautiful. Why did she need a surgeon? I dug through her timeline. 2 weeks before the wedding prep began, she had posted a selfie from a hospital bed with a bandage on her nose. Caption: Finally fixing my deviated septum. Breathing is going to be so much better. I zoomed in. Deviated septum, my foot. It was a rhinoplasty. My mother had used my daughter's textbook money to buy my sister a new nose profile for the wedding photos. The audacity was so sharp it almost made me laugh. Almost. But then I found the anomaly. The math wasn't adding up. The dress, the hotel, the nose. There was still money left over. I clicked on the final check image. I expected to see a florist. I expected a caterer. I expected a band. Check number 104. Pay to the order of Jason Miller. Amount $15,000. Memo consulting fee. I froze. Jason, the groom. The man with the perfect teeth and the firm handshake who worked in finance. Why was Beatrice writing him a check from the stolen funds consulting fee? Jason didn't consult for our family. He was marrying into it. I leaned closer to the screen, the blue light reflecting in my eyes. I switched to his LinkedIn profile. Senior wealth manager. He knew the law. He knew about fiduciary duty. And then it clicked. This wasn't a gift. This was a kickback. Beatrice needed Jason to keep Tiffany happy, or maybe Jason had found out about the source of the funds, and Beatrice paid him to keep his mouth shut. Or worse, he had helped her structure the withdrawal to avoid immediate flags. He wasn't just an innocent bystander marrying a spoiled girl. He was an accomplice. He had accepted stolen property. My hands were shaking not from fear, but from the adrenaline of the kill. I had them. I had the paper trail that linked the theft directly to the family investment. Beatrice thought she was slick. She thought she had washed the money clean by turning it into a wedding. But she forgot the golden rule of accounting: every debit has a credit. And now I had the receipts. I looked at the total on my spreadsheet. It matched the stolen amount down to the last 1,000. I closed the laptop. The fan whirred into silence, leaving the room quiet again. I looked at the pile of evidence I had just digitally assembled. It was enough to ruin them. It was enough to stop the wedding. But I wasn't going to stop the wedding. Not yet. Why interrupt the enemy when they are making a mistake? I had the map of where the money went. Now I needed a weapon to make them pay for it. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I hadn't used in years. A woman named Sarah, a lawyer who terrified judges and ate fraudsters for breakfast. I didn't want a settlement. I wanted a slaughter. Beatrice wanted a family investment. I was about to show her exactly what kind of dividends her actions had earned. The heavy glass door of the law firm hissed shut behind me, sealing out the noise of the city. The silence in the reception area was expensive. It smelled like leather and intimidation. I wasn't here to cry. I wasn't here to seek therapy. I was here to buy a weapon, and that weapon's name was Sarah. She sat behind a desk that looked like it was carved from the hull of a warship, flipping through the file I had compiled in my kitchen war room. Sarah was a shark, the kind of lawyer who didn't just win cases. She eviscerated the opposition. She didn't offer me a tissue. She didn't ask how I was feeling. She just tapped her fingernail against the printout of Check Memo 104. Joint tenancy, she said, her voice sharp enough to cut paper. Legally, she had the right to access the account. That's the first wall we hit. Most lawyers would tell you to go home and lick your wounds. My heart hammered against my ribs. Was this it? Was the perfect crime actually perfect? But then Sarah stopped tapping. She looked up and her eyes weren't sympathetic. They were gleaming. But your mother got greedy, she continued, and arrogance makes people sloppy. She stood up and walked to the whiteboard on her wall, uncapping a red marker. The sound of the marker squeaking against the board was the only sound in the room. It sounded like a knife sharpening. If she had taken the cash and kept it under her mattress, you'd be out of luck, Sarah explained, drawing a circle around the word theft. But she didn't. She moved it electronically. She paid vendors. She transferred funds across state lines to verified business accounts. Sarah wrote 2 words in big red letters: wire fraud. This isn't just a family dispute anymore, Amelia. Using electronic banking systems to facilitate a theft scheme is a federal offense. It carries prison time. Prison. The word hung in the air. I pictured Beatrice in an orange jumpsuit stripping the lavender perfume from her wrists. It was a nice image, but I needed more. I pointed to the printout of the check to Jason. What about him? I asked. The groom. Sarah smirked. It was a terrifying look. That, she said, circling Jason's name, is the nail in the coffin. He accepted $15,000. He works in finance. He knows the know your customer laws. He knows fiduciary responsibility. By accepting that check labeled consulting fee when no consulting was done, he just committed receipt of stolen property. She drew a line connecting Beatrice to Jason. He's not just a bystander, Amelia. He's an accomplice. We can go after his license. We can end his career before the honeymoon starts. I felt a rush of adrenaline. It wasn't happiness. It was power. For days I had felt small, like a child standing in the shadow of a giant. Now the giant had a target on its back. But then came the hardest part, the strategy. "So we file today?" I asked, reaching for my pen. "We freeze the assets, stop the wedding." Sarah snatched the pen from my hand. She capped it with a loud click. That click echoed in the room like a gunshot. "No," she said softly. "We do absolutely nothing." I blinked. "Nothing? They are spending my daughter's tuition on orchids and champagne right now. Every hour I wait is another $1,000 gone." "Think like an auditor, Amelia," Sarah said, leaning across the desk. "If we file an injunction today, what happens? The judge freezes the accounts. The wedding gets canceled. Beatrice plays the victim. She cries to the family that her jealous daughter ruined Tiffany's big day over a misunderstanding. She settles with you, pays back maybe half the money over 10 years, and keeps her reputation." She was right. I knew the pattern. Beatrice would spin this. She would make me the villain. "So what do we do?" I whispered. "We wait," Sarah said. She walked back to the window, looking down at the city. "We let them spend it, all of it. We let them reach the point of sunk cost. Let the vendors get paid. Let the guests arrive. Let the vows be written." She turned back to me, her face hard as stone. "We want the damages to be maximized. We don't just want the money back. We want unjust enrichment and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The more they spend, the deeper the hole they dig. When the lawsuit hits, we want them to have zero liquidity to fight back." The trap. It was a trap. I understood the logic immediately. It was the same way I caught tax cheats. You don't arrest them when they hide the first dollar. You wait until they've bought the yacht and the mansion. You wait until they feel safe. "So I have to watch," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "I have to watch them celebrate with my money. I have to go to that church and sit in the back row and do nothing." "You aren't doing anything," Sarah corrected. "You are letting the interest compound. You are letting the reputational damage accrue." She slid a contract toward me. "We draft the complaint now, we have it ready, we have the process server on standby, but we don't pull the trigger until the damage is irreversible." I looked at the contract. Amelia Vance versus Beatrice Vance, Tiffany Vance, and Jason Miller. It looked like a death warrant. "When?" I asked. Sarah smiled again. "The wedding is in 3 weeks. We serve them immediately after the ceremony. Let them say, 'I do.' Let them take the photos. And then when they are high on their own success, we drop the hammer." I picked up the pen again. This time my hand didn't shake. I signed my name. The scratch of the ink on the paper felt permanent. I wasn't just hiring a lawyer. I was signing off on the destruction of my family. "Good," Sarah said, closing the folder. "Go home, Amelia. Don't text them. Don't answer their calls. Let them think you're defeated. Silence is the most terrifying thing you can give them right now." I walked out of the office and into the elevator. As the metal doors closed, I saw my reflection in the polished steel. I looked tired. I looked pale. But the fear was gone. Beatrice thought she had won because I went silent. She didn't know that silence is what a predator does before it strikes. I pressed the button for the lobby. The elevator dropped, my stomach lurching with it. The trap was set. Now I just had to wait for the mouse to take the cheese. And the cheese was a $199,000 wedding. 3 days. That's how long I went without speaking a single word to anyone who shared my last name. In the world of forensic accounting, silence isn't empty. It's a strategy. It's the pause before the audit results are released. My phone sat on the kitchen counter, vibrating against the granite every few hours like an angry hornet. First, it was Tiffany sending photos of table settings with captions like, "Too bad you're busy with work." Then it was my father leaving voicemail after voicemail of heavy, wet breathing and half-hearted apologies. And finally, Beatrice. But I didn't answer. I didn't block them. I just let the phone buzz. Beatrice was waiting for the explosion. I knew her playbook. She wanted me to storm over to her house screaming and crying so she could call the police and paint me as the unstable, jealous sister. She wanted to be the victim. She wanted to sigh to her rich friends. Poor Amelia, she's just never been quite right since the divorce. But by giving her absolutely nothing, I was denying her the fuel she needed to burn me. Silence is a vacuum, and narcissists hate vacuums. They need attention to survive, even if it's negative. Without my reaction, Beatrice was starving. While they were panicking over my silence, I was busy becoming someone else. I put on my work voice, the flat professional tone I used when interrogating CFOs about missing assets. I sat at my laptop, opened a spreadsheet, and started dialing. I wasn't Amelia the daughter. I was Amelia Vance, Family Trust Administrator. I called the florist first. "Good afternoon," I said, typing as I spoke. "This is Amelia Vance, handling the reconciliation for the Vance wedding accounts. I'm seeing a wire transfer of $12,000, but I'm missing the itemized invoice for the tax records. Could you forward that to me immediately? The auditors are breathing down my neck." The florist didn't hesitate. Why would she? I used the magic words tax records and auditors. People are terrified of the IRS. "Oh, of course," she chirped. "I'll email it right now. We had to rush order the white orchids from Holland, that's why the shipping cost was so high." Ding. The email landed in my inbox. I opened the PDF. There it was. $12,000 for flowers that would die in 24 hours. Paid for by client Beatrice Vance. Source of funds, wire ending in 8802. My daughter's college fund was now officially a pile of dying vegetation. I didn't stop. I called the caterer. I called the lighting rental company. I called the valet service. "Hi, this is the accountant. Yes, just need the receipt for the lobster tails. Thank you." "Hello, just verifying the deposit for the silk table runners." Perfect. Each call was a brick in the wall I was building around them. With every PDF I saved, the case for unjust enrichment became bulletproof. These weren't just expenses, they were evidence of a lifestyle funded by theft. I printed them out one by one, the laser printer's rhythmic whir, click, whir, becoming the heartbeat of my revenge. The stack of paper grew higher, a physical monument to their greed. By 4 p.m., I had a paper trail that detailed exactly how every single cent of that $190,000 was being wasted. They were eating my daughter's future. They were drinking it. They were walking on it. Then the phone buzzed again. A physical anchor that snapped me out of my trance. It was a text from Beatrice. She couldn't take the silence anymore. "I know you're seeing these messages, Amelia. Don't you dare try to ruin this for your sister. This is the most important week of her life. If you cause a scene, you are dead to this family." I stared at the screen. The threat was so explicit, so desperate. A week ago, this text would have made me cry. It would have made me beg for forgiveness. But now it just looked like leverage. She was scared. She didn't know where I was or what I was doing, and that terrified her. I hovered my thumb over the screen. I could reply. I could tell her I knew about the kickback to Jason. I could tell her about the lawyer. But that would give her power. It would give her a warning. Instead, I did something far crueler. I went into my settings. I turned on Read Receipts. Then I opened the message. I let it sit there for 5 seconds. I watched the status change on her end. Read at 4:12 p.m. And then I put the phone down. I didn't type a response. I didn't send an angry emoji. I just let her see that I had read her threat and deemed it unworthy of a reply. That little read label was a psychological knife. It told her, "I see you. I hear you. And you don't matter." Across town in her lavender-scented mansion, I knew Beatrice was staring at her phone, her blood pressure spiking. Was I calling the police? Was I coming over with a gun? Was I writing a tell-all on Facebook? The not knowing was torture. I turned back to my laptop. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the war room. The silence in my apartment was heavy, but it wasn't lonely anymore. It was charged. I had the invoices. I had the legal complaint ready to file. I had the psychological upper hand. But as I reached for my coffee cup, A notification popped up on my laptop screen. It wasn't an email from a vendor. It was a Google alert I had set up for Jason Miller. New court filing Miller versus Miller. Divorce decree finalized 2021. I frowned. Was Jason divorced? That wasn't a secret. He had mentioned an ex-wife. But I clicked the link anyway. It was a public record from a county court 3 hours away. I scanned the document looking for financial disclosures. And then I saw it. A line item on page 14 regarding outstanding debts. Gambling debts, $45,000. I froze. The room seemed to get colder. Jason didn't just accept the $15,000 kickback because he was greedy. He accepted it because he was desperate. He wasn't a senior wealth manager protecting his assets. He was a drowning man looking for a lifeline, and my mother had thrown him my money as a rope. This changed everything. Beatrice wasn't just stealing to show off, she was covering up a mess. The perfect son-in-law was a liability. The perfect wedding was a cover-up. I leaned back, a cold smile touching my lips. My mother wanted a family investment. Well, she had invested in a sinking ship. And I was the only one with the torpedoes. I picked up the phone again. I wasn't going to text Beatrice, I was going to make one more call, not to a vendor, but to the one person who might have the final piece of this puzzle, the ex-wife. The silence was over. It was time to start making some noise. The sound of the intercom buzzer at 10:15 p.m. sounded like a fire alarm in the quiet of my apartment. It shattered the stillness I had carefully cultivated for 3 days. I checked the grainy black and white monitor. It was my father, but he didn't look like the broken man I had left crying in the diner. He was pacing. He was checking over his shoulder. He looked like a man who knew the building was on fire and was the only one with the exit code. I buzzed him in. When I opened my door, Robert Vance didn't say hello. He walked straight past me, locked the deadbolt, and leaned his back against the wood, breathing hard. He wasn't holding a pitiful envelope of cash this time. He was empty-handed, but his eyes were wide with a terror I hadn't seen since I was a child. "She's calling the bank tomorrow," he said, the words tumbling out in a rush. "She's trying to trigger the HELOC clause. She wants to tap the equity in the house. Our house." I stood in the hallway, arms crossed. "The house is in joint tenancy," I said, my voice flat. "She needs your signature to secure a loan against it." "She forged yours," he whispered. "What makes you think she won't forge mine?" The air in the room shifted. This wasn't just about my $190,000 anymore. Beatrice was a shark in a feeding frenzy. She had devoured my daughter's college fund, and now that the wedding costs were ballooning, likely thanks to Jason's gambling debts, she was coming for the marrow in my father's bones. She was going to liquidate his retirement fund to pay for a party. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "You said you couldn't stop her." "I can't," he admitted, and the shame on his face was painful to watch. "I'm weak, Amelia. I've been weak for 30 years, but I'm not homeless. If she takes the house, I have nothing." He pushed off the door and walked into the light of the kitchen. "I know you're planning something. I saw the way you looked at Jason's car. I know you didn't just walk away." He was smarter than I gave him credit for, or maybe desperation just clarifies the senses. I looked at him, really looked at him. He was an enabler, yes, but right now, he was a witness turning state's evidence. "I am planning something," I said, stepping closer, "and it's going to be violent, not physically, but legally. When I'm done, she won't just be broke, she'll be uninsurable." "Good," he said. The word hung there heavy and dark. "But here is the deal," I continued, my voice dropping to a whisper. "You don't warn her. You don't tell her I have a lawyer. You don't tell her I know about Jason's debts. You sign nothing. You stall her on the house loan for 5 more days. Can you do that?" "5 days?" he asked. "Until the wedding is over, until the money is spent. If you warn her, you are a co-conspirator and I will sue you for the house too. But if you stand aside, if you let the bomb explode, you might just get to keep the rubble." He nodded slowly. He understood the terms. It wasn't forgiveness. It was a strategic armistice. Then he reached into his pocket. My stomach tightened, expecting another insult like the $200. But he didn't pull out money. He pulled out a silver USB drive. It was old scratch, the kind you get free at a trade show. I hacked her laptop, he said. Or, well, I guessed her password. It's Tiffany forever. He placed the drive on the counter. It made a small clack sound, a physical anchor that weighed more than gold. You need to see the emails. This wasn't an emergency, Amelia. She didn't panic and take the money last week. I looked at the drive. What is it? It's the plan, he said, his voice trembling. She's been planning this since Christmas. He left a minute later, slipping out into the night like a ghost. I locked the door and immediately plugged the drive into my laptop. The folder popped up. It was labeled Project Matrimony. I opened the first file. It was an email chain between Beatrice and a wedding planner dated 6 months ago. From Beatrice Vance to Elite Events Planning date January 14th. Subject: budget concerns. Don't worry about the deposit schedule. I have a maturation date on a family investment account coming up in July. It's sitting there doing nothing. I'll liquidate it to cover the platinum package. The account holder won't even notice until it's too late. I felt the blood drain from my face. My hands went cold. She hadn't just stolen the money because the costs got too high. She hadn't done it to save face at the last minute. She had looked at my daughter's future 6 months ago and earmarked it as her personal piggy bank. She had spent the last half year smiling at me, eating my cooking and holding Lily's hand, all while counting down the days until she could rob us. This wasn't just wire fraud. This was premeditated larceny. It was malice aforethought. I copied the files to my secure cloud drive. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. I had the theft. I had the accomplices, and now I had the map of the killer's mind. I closed the laptop, but the anger inside me wasn't burning anymore. It had turned into ice. They wanted a wedding, I was going to give them a funeral. And the best part, Beatrice had invited me to read the eulogy. The gravel of the country club driveway crunched under the tires of my 10-year-old sedan, sounding like bones breaking in the polite silence of the evening. I wasn't supposed to be here. The invitation Beatrice had thrown at me explicitly said ceremony only, which meant I was banned from the rehearsal dinner. But I wasn't here to eat their overpriced salmon. I was here to deliver a message without saying a word. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. I wasn't wearing the beige blend-in dress Beatrice would have wanted. I was wearing black, head-to-toe black, sharp, tailored, and severe. I didn't look like a wedding guest. I looked like I was on my way to a funeral. In a way, I was. I stepped out of the car, tossing the keys to a stunned valet who looked at my beat-up Honda like it was a crime scene. I walked toward the patio, where the cocktail hour was in full swing. The air smelled of expensive perfume and the salty tang of the ocean, a stark contrast to the smell of stale coffee that had filled my apartment for the last week. From the shadows of the trellis, I watched them. Beatrice was holding a glass of champagne, laughing at something the senator's wife said. She looked triumphant. She thought my silence meant submission. She thought she had successfully bullied me into the corner. She had no idea that while she was picking out napkins, I had been picking apart her life with a forensic scalpel. I didn't walk into the crowd. I didn't make a scene. I just stood at the edge of the light, letting my presence seep into the party like a drop of poison in a water glass. A few guests noticed me first. Their smiles faltered. Whispers started to ripple through the group. Is that the sister? Why is she wearing black? Beatrice turned her eyes, widening for a fraction of a second before she plastered on her fake smile. She couldn't scream at me here, not in front of the senator. She was trapped by her own need for perfection. I locked eyes with her, gave a small cold nod, and then turned my attention to my real target. Jason. The groom was standing near the valet stand, admiring a sleek black Porsche 911 that still had the dealer ribbon on the dashboard. He was laughing with his groomsmen, looking like the picture of success. But I saw the tension in his shoulders. I saw the way he tapped his foot nervously. He was a man with $45,000 in gambling debts who had just bought a $100,000 car with stolen money. I walked over to him. The click of my heels on the pavement was the only sound I made. He turned and his smile died instantly. "Amelia," he stammered, looking around to see if Beatrice was watching. I I didn't think you were coming tonight." The invite said. "Nice car," I interrupted, running a finger along the hood of the Porsche. The metal was cool and smooth. "New." Jason swallowed hard. "Yeah, just picked it up. A little wedding gift to myself." "Must have been expensive," I said, my voice low and conversational. "Financial management must be booming this quarter. Or maybe you just came into a sudden windfall, a consulting fee perhaps." His face went pale. The blood drained out of him so fast he looked like a wax figure. He knew. In that split second, he knew that I knew. The consulting fee memo on the check, he thought it was clever. He thought it was hidden. But to an auditor, it was a neon sign pointing directly to fraud. "I don't know what you're talking about," he whispered, stepping closer to me, his voice taking on a desperate edge. "Look, Amelia, if you're here to cause trouble, Beatrice will—" "Beatrice can't help you, Jason," I said, cutting him off. I leaned in just close enough that he could smell the lack of fear on me. "She's the one who wrote the check, but you're the one who cashed it. That makes you an accessory." He looked like he was going to be sick right there on the pavement. He looked back at the party at Tiffany laughing in her white dress at Beatrice holding court. He realized suddenly that the life he was marrying into wasn't a golden ticket. It was a trap, and he was standing in the jaws of it. "I have to go," he muttered, reaching for the door handle of his new car, as if physically retreating into the object of his greed would save him. "It is a beautiful car," I said, stepping back and giving him a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "I really hope the engine is strong enough to run away." "What the hell is that supposed to mean?" he snapped, his voice cracking. "It means the reception is going to be interesting," I replied. "Enjoy the dinner, Jason. Try the lobster. It's the last expensive meal you're going to eat for a very long time." I didn't wait for his response. I turned on my heel and walked back toward my car. I didn't look at Beatrice. I didn't look at Tiffany. I didn't need to. The seed was planted. As I drove away, I checked the rearview mirror one last time. Jason was still standing by the Porsche, but he wasn't looking at the car anymore. He was looking at the restaurant. He was looking at Beatrice, and for the first time, I saw suspicion in his eyes. Beatrice thought she was the puppet master. She didn't realize I had just cut the strings. Tonight, Jason wouldn't sleep. He would lie in bed next to my sister, wondering how much I knew, wondering if his mother-in-law had set him up. Paranoia is a powerful thing. It makes people sloppy. It makes them turn on each other. I drove home into the darkness, the silence of the car feeling like a victory. The rehearsal was over. The stage was set. Tomorrow I wouldn't be the woman in black standing in the shadows. I would be in the spotlight. And everything they had built on lies was about to burn. The open loop in my mind finally closed. I didn't just want my money back. I wanted to watch them eat each other alive. And tomorrow, the feast would begin. The heavy gold doors of the Plaza Hotel swung open with a hushed whoosh, sealing us inside a vacuum of air-conditioned wealth. The transition was jarring. One minute I was standing on the dirty pavement of Fifth Avenue, the next I was drowning in a sea of silk and perfume. The ballroom didn't smell like a party, it smelled like theft. Specifically, it smelled like $12,000 worth of white orchids imported from Holland. I knew the price because I had the invoice folded in my clutch. Every petal in that room was paid for with the overtime shifts I worked in 2018. I walked past the centerpieces, resisting the urge to rip them apart. To everyone else, they were beautiful. To me, they looked like the textbooks I couldn't afford to buy for Lily. I stayed near the back, finding a shadow between a marble pillar and the bar. From here, I had a perfect view of the crime scene. And there she was, Beatrice, the mastermind. She was standing next to a champagne tower that towered over the guests' $5,000 of vintage bubbly stacked in a fragile pyramid. She looked radiant. She was holding the senator's hand with both of hers, nodding humbly as he whispered something into her ear. I could read her lips. She was saying, "Oh, it was a sacrifice, but family is everything." A sacrifice. I felt a laugh bubble up in my throat, bitter and sharp like acid. The only thing she had sacrificed was her soul. She was playing the role of the sainted mother so perfectly that even I almost believed her. She wasn't just attending a wedding. She was laundering her reputation. She was using my money to buy her way into high society, one stolen dollar at a time. The guests were eating it up. I heard a woman in pearls whisper to her husband, "Beatrice is so generous, doing all this alone, she's a marvel." They didn't know. They saw the facade. I saw the forensic trail. But they weren't drinking champagne. They were drinking account 8802. Then the crowd shifted and my heart stopped. Standing near the dessert table trying to make herself invisible was Lily, my daughter. I had told her to stay home. I had told her this wasn't a place for us. But Beatrice had insisted. "Bring her Amelia. Don't be cruel. She wants to see her aunt be a princess." I looked at my little girl. She wasn't looking at the princess. She was looking at a tray of chocolate-covered strawberries like they were gold bars. She was wearing her blue Sunday dress, the one from 3 years ago. The hem was too high. The sleeves were too tight. She looked small. She looked poor. And she was standing alone while her grandmother, the woman who had robbed her, was laughing 10 feet away, wearing a necklace that could have paid for Lily's entire wardrobe for a decade. Beatrice walked past the dessert table. She saw Lily. I watched her eyes flick over my daughter. She didn't smile. She didn't offer her a strawberry. She looked at Lily's old dress with a flash of annoyance as if my daughter were a stain on the tablecloth, and then turned her back to order more wine. That was it. That was the moment the last tether snapped. Up until now, a tiny stupid part of me had felt guilty. Was I going too far? Was I ruining a special day? But seeing Beatrice look at my daughter with that cold, dismissive sneer erased every doubt. This wasn't revenge anymore. This was a correction. The universe was out of balance, and I was the only one with the weight to fix it. I wasn't just a forensic accountant hunting a fraudster. I was a mother watching a wolf starve her cub. I clutched my bag tighter. Inside wasn't just a phone. It was the kill switch. I had already spoken to the AV guy. I had flashed my badge, not my work ID, but an old conference badge that looked official enough to scare a college kid working a soundboard. I told him there was a surprise presentation from the maid of honor. He had plugged in my laptop without asking a single question. The music lowered. The DJ tapped the microphone. Thump, thump, thump. That sound echoed through the room, silencing the laughter. "Ladies and gentlemen," the DJ announced, his voice booming, "we have a few special words before we cut the cake." Beatrice beamed. She thought this was the part where people toasted her. She thought I was going to sit in the back and choke on my anger. She adjusted her shawl, ready to receive her applause. She had no idea that the projector screen descending behind her wasn't for a slideshow of childhood photos. I stepped out from behind the pillar. I smoothed my black dress. I didn't walk like a guest. I walked like I was entering a courtroom. The air in the room felt thin, charged with the electricity of an approaching storm. I looked at Jason. He was sweating, staring at me with wide, terrified eyes. He knew. I looked at my father. He was staring at the floor, bracing for impact. He knew. But Beatrice. She was still smiling. "I'd like to say a few words," I said, my voice cutting through the silence. I didn't need the microphone yet. My voice was projected by pure rage. Beatrice's smile faltered. "Amelia," she hissed, stepping forward. "This isn't on the schedule." "Oh, I know, Mother," I said, walking steadily toward the stage, my eyes locked on hers. "But we always talk about how much you gave for this wedding. I think it's time everyone saw exactly what the cost was." I reached the podium. I saw the laptop sitting there, the HDMI cable glowing like a fuse. I placed my hand on the trackpad. The cursor hovered over the file named The Truth PTX. The facade was perfect. The flowers were perfect. The lies were perfect. But in forensics, we have a saying, the numbers never lie. and I was about to make the numbers scream. I looked at Lily one last time. "This is for you, baby." Then I pressed the spacebar. The microphone felt cold and heavy in my hand like the handle of a loaded gun. The hum of the speakers filled the room, a low, static buzz that silenced the clinking of silverware. Beatrice stood 10 feet away, her mouth open in a frozen smile that was rapidly cracking at the edges. She took a step toward me, her eyes darting to the security guards by the door, but I didn't flinch. I just looked up at the projection booth in the back of the room. The AV tech, a college kid named Kevin, met my eyes. He looked terrified. He should be. I had shown him my badge earlier and explained that cutting my mic would be considered tampering with evidence in an active federal investigation. Kevin didn't want to go to jail. He nodded once, his hand trembling over the laptop. "You all know me as the sister," I said, my voice steady, amplified through the plaza ballroom. "But in my real life, I'm a forensic auditor, and I couldn't help but notice that my mother has been very modest about the details of this wedding." Beatrice lunged forward. "Amelia, get down from there right now, you're drunk." "I'm not drunk, Mother," I replied, my voice cutting over hers. "I'm just thorough." I raised the small clicker in my left hand and pressed the button. Click. The giant screen behind the head table descended with a mechanical whir, a sound that seemed to slice through the tension like a saw. A beam of white light hit the canvas, blinding Beatrice for a second. The guests gasped. They were expecting a slideshow of Tiffany's childhood photos. Instead, they were looking at a spreadsheet. Slide 1, actual wedding costs. The numbers were blown up to 10-foot-tall font. Vera Wang custom gown, $45,000. Plaza Hotel venue. Deposit $80,000. Imported Dutch orchids, $12,000. Plastic surgery. Rhinoplasty, $20,000. "You see," I said, walking around the podium so I could look the senator directly in the eye. "My mother told everyone this was a family investment. She told you she sacrificed to give Tiffany the perfect day. And she was right about the cost. It was expensive." "Turn it off!" Jason screamed. He jumped up from his seat, knocking over his champagne glass. The crash of the crystal shattering against the floor made half the room jump. "Cut the feed." "Sit down, Jason," I said. "I'm not done." I clicked the button again. Click. Slide 2. Source of funds. The screen shifted. On the left was the total cost. On the right was a bank statement. Account name: Lily Vance Education Fund. Account number ending in 8802. Transaction type: unauthorized withdrawal. Amount: $199, $420.50. A murmur rippled through the crowd. It started low and grew into a roar of whispers. I pointed to the back of the room where my daughter Lily was standing by the dessert table, her eyes wide. "That isn't Beatrice's money," I said, and for the first time my voice dropped an octave, vibrating with cold, hard rage. "That is 18 years of my life. That is my daughter's college tuition. Every flower on these tables, every drop of wine you are drinking, you are consuming a child's future. My mother didn't pay for this wedding. My 10-year-old daughter did." Beatrice grabbed the tablecloth, her face turning a violent shade of red. "She's lying. It's a joint account. It's family money. She gave it to us." "Did I?" I asked. "Let's ask your email outbox." I clicked the button one last time. Click. Slide 3, the smoking gun. The screen displayed an email chain. The timestamp was from 6 months ago. The sender was Beatrice Vance. The recipient was Jason Miller. The text was highlighted in bright yellow. Subject: cash flow. "Don't worry about the budget, Jason. Just use that idiot's money. She won't figure it out until the honeymoon. By then it'll be too late to do anything about it." The silence that followed was absolute. It was a vacuum. No one breathed. No one moved. The words, "that idiot's money," hung over the bride and groom like a verdict. Jason sank back into his chair, putting his head in his hands. Tiffany looked at the screen, then at her new husband, horror dawning on her face as she realized she had married a co-conspirator. But I wasn't looking at them. I was looking at Beatrice. She looked small now. The grand matriarch, the generous host, was stripped naked by 3 slides of PowerPoint. I walked to the edge of the stage and looked down at her. "Mom," I said into the silence, "you always taught me to share. You said family shares everything. So today I wanted to share the truth with the whole family and the senator." I put the microphone down on the podium. It made a loud thud. That thud was the signal. At the main table, a chair scraped loudly against the parquet floor. It was a harsh, ugly sound. Everyone turned. The Senator Jason's father stood up. He didn't look at his son. He didn't look at the bride. He looked at Beatrice with a disgust so profound it could have peeled paint. He buttoned his jacket, turned his back on the head table, and walked out of the ballroom without saying a single word. His exit was the first domino. The spell was broken. The room erupted into chaos, but I didn't stay to watch. I had executed the plan. The evidence was public. The reputation was dead. I walked off the stage past the frozen waiters, past the crying bride, and straight toward my daughter. The wedding wasn't over, but the marriage definitely was. And outside the double doors, I knew the process server was waiting. The party was ending, but the lawsuit was just beginning. The sound of a wedding dying is very specific. It's not a scream or a crash. It's the sound of expensive silverware hitting the floor and the shuffling of 300 people trying to escape a crime scene at the same time. I stood by the double doors holding Lily's hand, watching the plaza ballroom empty out. It was like watching a dam break. The senator had led the charge, and his exit gave everyone else permission to flee. But the real show wasn't the guests leaving, it was the man walking in. He wasn't wearing a tuxedo. He was wearing a beige windbreaker and thick-soled shoes that squeaked against the marble. He looked like a thumbtack in a pile of silk. He walked straight through the scattering crowd right up to the head table where Beatrice was frantically trying to explain to a waiter why she couldn't pay the remaining balance on the bar tab. "Beatrice Vance?" the man asked. His voice was bored. He did this 10 times a day. Beatrice spun around, mascara running down her cheeks like black tears. "Not now," she shrieked. "Can't you see I'm in a crisis?" The man didn't blink. He just slapped a thick envelope against her chest. "You've been served," he said. Then he turned to the sobbing bride. "Tiffany Vance, slap, and Jason Miller." He tossed the last envelope onto the table next to the uneaten wedding cake. "Courtesy of Amelia Vance." Beatrice stared at the papers. She didn't need to open them to know what they were: full complaint, fraud, conversion, unjust enrichment. But the real weapon wasn't the lawsuit, it was the dossier I had emailed 30 minutes ago. The fallout was faster than gravity. Monday morning, 9:00 a.m. I was sitting in my car outside Jason's office building. I wanted to see it happen. I watched security escort him out. He wasn't carrying a box of personal items. He was just carrying his jacket. I had sent the anonymous tip to his firm's compliance officer on Friday night. Subject: Senior Wealth Manager involvement in wire fraud scheme. I attached the email where Beatrice told him to use that idiot's money and the bank record of his $15,000 kickback. In finance, you can survive a bad trade, but you cannot survive an ethics violation. He was done. His license would be revoked. The Porsche repossessed by the end of the week. He stood on the sidewalk looking lost, and for a second our eyes met. He didn't look angry. He looked like he was waking up from a coma. Tuesday afternoon. The senator's lawyers moved even faster. They didn't file for divorce. They filed for an annulment based on material fraud. Tiffany was back in Beatrice's mansion before her bouquet had even wilted. She wasn't a wife anymore. She was just a girl with a nose job she couldn't afford, and a husband who was technically a felon. Wednesday, the showdown. I walked into Beatrice's house. The lavender smell was gone. Now it smelled like cardboard and panic. There were boxes everywhere. Beatrice was sitting at the dining table, the same table where she had planned the theft, with her head in her hands. My lawyer Sarah sat opposite her, looking like a statue of justice carved out of ice. I can't go to jail, Amelia, Beatrice whispered. She didn't look up. I'm 60 years old. I have high blood pressure. Then you shouldn't have committed federal wire fraud, I said, sitting down. I placed a folder on the table. The FBI doesn't care about your blood pressure, Mother. They care that you move stolen funds across state lines to pay vendors in New Jersey and Connecticut. Beatrice looked at me. The arrogance was gone. The brand was destroyed. She was just a scared old woman who had gambled everything on a lie and lost. What do you want? She asked. I want total liquidation. Sarah answered for me. She slid a settlement agreement across the table. You sell the house, you sell the jewelry, you sell the car, you pay Amelia the full $199,000. I can't sell the house, Beatrice cried. Where will I live? That's not my problem, I said. But I'm adding a tax, for the stress, for the lawyer fees, for the fact that my daughter had to watch you eat strawberries while she starved. I tapped the paper. Plus $50,000 in punitive damages. Total repayment, $250,000. I don't have that kind of money. You have equity, I pointed out. The market is hot. Sell the house today and I'll drop the criminal charges. I'll settle for civil restitution. If you refuse, I hand the full file to the district attorney and you can think about it in a cell for 5 to 10 years. It was the only choice she had, prison or poverty. Beatrice looked around the room at the gilded mirrors, at the velvet curtains, the stage set of her life. She realized she had to burn the set to save the actor. She picked up the pen. Her hand shook so violently that the signature looked like a seismograph of an earthquake. Beatrice Vance. It's done, she whispered, pushing the paper away. I hope you're happy. You've made your own mother homeless. No, I said, standing up and taking the contract. I just made you pay your bill. I walked out of that house for the last time. I watched the for sale sign being hammered into the lawn by a realtor who looked far too cheerful. The house was gone. The money was coming back. Justice had been served cold and precise. But as I got into my car, I didn't feel the rush of joy I expected. I felt heavy. The war was over. I had won. But standing in the wreckage of my family, holding a check that would restore my daughter's future, I realized there was one final transaction left to process. The money could be recovered. But the trust. That was an asset that had been written off to zero, and no amount of lawsuits could ever bring it back. I looked at the passenger seat where Lily was waiting for me. She smiled, oblivious to the carnage I had just left behind. Did we win, Mom? She asked. I started the engine. Yes, baby, I said. We won. But as I drove away, leaving the ruins of the Vance Empire in my rearview mirror, I wondered what victory was supposed to feel like. Because right now, it just felt like survival. And survival leaves scars. The question now wasn't how to fight, but how to heal. And that was a process no lawyer could help me with. The enter key on my laptop makes a specific sound. It's a sharp plastic clack. Usually that sound signifies the end of a workday or the submission of a tax return. But today at 10:00 a.m. on a Tuesday, that sound signified the end of a war. I watched the progress bar on the screen load. Processing transfer. The numbers on the screen were beautiful. Not just the original $199,420.50, but the additional $50,000 in punitive damages. Beatrice had sold the house. She had sold the diamond earrings she wore to my graduation. She had liquidated her life to stay out of a federal prison cell, and now all of that energy was moving into a new home. I didn't put the money back into a savings account. I didn't put it in a joint account. I moved it into an irrevocable trust. The screen flashed green. Transfer complete. I sat back in my chair and let out a breath I felt like I had been holding for 6 months. An irrevocable trust is the financial equivalent of a nuclear bunker. Once the money is in there, it belongs to the beneficiary, Lily. I can't touch it. My father can't touch it. And Beatrice definitely can't touch it. It was locked away, safe from greed, safe from family emergencies, safe from me. I traced the screen with my finger. It was done. The balance was 0 in my account, but infinite in Lily's future. But victory in the real world isn't like the movies. The credits didn't roll, the music didn't swell. Instead, my phone buzzed. It was a physical anchor that dragged me right back from my moment of peace. I looked at the screen. Mom. I stared at the name. A month ago, seeing that name made my heart race with fear. Now it just made me feel tired. I knew I shouldn't answer. Sarah, my lawyer, told me to block her. But some habits are harder to break than a joint bank account. I swiped right. I put the phone to my ear. I didn't say hello. I just listened to the sound of breathing on the other end. It was ragged, wet, and pathetic. Amelia! Her voice was small. It sounded like the voice of an old woman stripped of her lavender perfume and her arrogance. Amelia, are you there? I'm here, I said. My voice was flat. I'm at a motel, she whispered. On the interstate, the one near the truck stop. It smells like smoke, Amelia. The sheets are thin. She paused, waiting for me to comfort her. When I didn't speak, she continued, her voice cracking. I have nowhere to go. The settlement took everything. Your father? He won't answer my calls. He's staying with his brother. I'm all alone. You have the motel? I said. For 2 nights, she cried, the old edge of hysteria creeping back in. After that, I'm on the street. Amelia, please. I'm your mother. I made a mistake. I was trying to help the family. I didn't mean to hurt you. There it was. The lie. The refusal to accept reality. She still thought she was the hero of the story. She still thought stealing my daughter's future was just a mistake, like spilling wine on a carpet. I need $500, she begged, just for a deposit on an efficiency apartment. I can pay you back. I'll get a job. Please, Amelia. You have the money now. You have all of it. Can't you spare a crumb for the woman who gave you life? I closed my eyes. I thought about the irrevocable trust. I thought about the $50,000 extra I had squeezed out of her. I could send her the money. It would be easy. It would stop the crying. It would make me feel like a good daughter. But then I looked at the photo of Lily on my desk. I remembered the strawberries at the plaza. I remembered the email where she called me an idiot. If I gave her $500 now next week, she would need rent, then groceries, then a car. The leech doesn't stop drinking blood because you ask it nicely. It stops when you burn it off. No, I said. The silence on the other end was shocking. What? No, I repeated. I can't help you. You're letting me starve, she screamed. You're letting your own mother be homeless. What kind of monster are you? I looked at my reflection in the dark monitor of my computer. I looked different. My eyes were harder. My mouth was set in a firm line. I didn't look like the girl who used to seek approval. I looked like a fortress. I'm the kind of monster who protects her cub, I said softly. You made your choice, Beatrice. You chose the wedding over the family. Now you have to live in the house you built. Amelia, wait. I pressed the red button. Click. The line went dead. I stared at the phone for a long moment, waiting for the guilt to crush me. But it didn't come. Instead, I felt a strange, hollow lightness. It wasn't happiness. It was the feeling of a heavy limb being amputated. It hurts, but at least the infection is gone. I looked in the mirror one last time. I wasn't the good daughter anymore. I had murdered that version of myself to save my child. And I was okay with that. Sometimes the price of peace is that you have to be the one to light the match and burn the bridge while your past is still standing on it. Mom, are we ready? I turned around. Lily was standing in the doorway holding a college brochure. She was smiling, wearing a t-shirt that didn't have holes in it, looking at me with total trust. Yeah, I said, grabbing my car keys. We're ready. We walked out to the car. The air outside was crisp and clean. As I drove onto the highway, merging into the traffic that flowed away from the city, away from the motel on the interstate, away from the ruins of the Vance family. I glanced at Lily in the passenger seat. She was singing along to the radio, tapping her hand on the dashboard. She didn't know about the phone call. She didn't know her grandmother was sleeping on dirty sheets. She only knew that she was going to college. I gripped the steering wheel. The scar of this betrayal would always be there. I would never trust easily again. I would never look at a bank statement without a flinch. But scars are just skin that grew back thicker. They are proof that you survived. Where to first? I asked. State University, Lily said, beaming. They have a great accounting program. I smiled, and for the first time in months it reached my eyes. Accounting, huh? Let me tell you a secret, kid. It's a dangerous superpower. I pressed the gas pedal. The car surged forward, leaving the past in the dust, speeding toward a future that was finally irrevocably ours. The cost was high, but the receipt was paid in full, and I kept the copy.